My informative speech will be on invisible disabilities. The definition of invisible disability is a person, in the terms, an invisible disability is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. Unfortunately, the very fact that these symptoms are invisible can lead to misunderstandings, false perceptions, and judgment. The stats. The ADA, the Americans with Disability Act of 1990, is an individual with a disability, a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. What an invisible disability is, often people think the term disability only refers to the people using a wheelchair or walker. The survey of income and program participation found that 26 million Americans, often 1 in 10, have a severe disability, while only 1.8 million used a wheelchair and 5.2 million used a cane, crutches, or walker. In other words, 74% of Americans who live with a severe disability do not use such devices. Therefore, disability cannot be determined solely by whether or not a person uses assistive equipment. We define invisible disability refers to symptoms such as debilitating pain, fatigue, dizziness, cognitive dysfunctions, brain injuries, learning differences, and mental health disorders, as well as hearing and vision impairments. These are not always obvious to the onlooker, but can sometimes or always limit daily activities, ranging from mild changes to severe limitations, and vary from person to person. Although the ADA has increased civil rights and accessibility for many people with disabilities, such persons continue to experience discrimination in hiring. Disclosure of a disability is a complex decision, but even more so when the disability is invisible and or carries significant social stigma. Candidates who discuss the disability received higher ratings on interview presentation, although applicants with disabilities are evaluated more positively. They are still less likely to be hired than are candidates without disabilities. When the disability is invisible to observers, the individual may choose to disclose or not, and may exercise greater choice in the manner in which the disclosure is accomplished. Most interventions were focused at the individual student level, aiming to support students to build skills, grow confidence through transitional supports, or compensate for challenges through educational adjustments. Structured educational interventions such as preparation, transition programs, or self-contained classrooms were more evident in the literature addressing supports for students experiencing mental ill health, and show promise for improving involvement in educational activities and course completion. Little has changed. This review lends weight to the assertion that relatively little progress has been made in establishing what works to support these students in post-secondary education to previous calls for the rigorous studies. For instance, future studies might usefully shed further light on the relative strengths and limitations of different interventions and their impacts on qualification, attainment, and workforce participation of post-secondary students with mental illness or ABI. More broadly, this review highlights the dominance of approaches to students with particular difficulties rather than on embedding approaches inclusive for diverse students. Given the challenges experienced by students with less visible and fluctuating disabilities can be easily overlooked, inclusive approaches to teaching, learning, and assessment that anticipate student diversity and difference may be particularly valuable for improving these students' access, experience, and success in post-secondary education. In conclusion, God made us all in His image, and we are to leave God to judging others. God has asked us to treat each person to meet as a neighbor and love them and to treat them marginalized even better. There is still a long way to go before we are to the point where people with disabilities are treated equally, and more research in this area is needed. More knowledge and media attention is also needed on this issue.